Oh,
so for the next recipe we're going to look at is that we know that for some patients, they might gain weight, right? And have an increase in appetite or fluid retention, so experiencing some bloating. And this can be a cause of maybe a therapy that the drug therapy that they're using. And you know, when you look at the research, we know that not one diet fits one person. There's lots of different diets out there. So the one that we've seen that the best one to follow is one that's specifically around eating patterns. So really making sure that and the Mediterranean diet is one that has been the most researched and the most successful, and it's really an eating pattern. So really focusing on the majority of your foods coming from plant-based foods, and you know, having some animal types of protein as well. So, you know, in terms of weight loss, you really want to think about strategies and setting up for success. So making sure that you have the foods that you need in your kitchen so that, you know, you could prepare meals that are balanced and keep you fuller for longer. So that's really one of the main keys that we're looking at today for this specific recipe, is the ways that you can incorporate foods into your meal so that you feel fuller for longer, so that, you know, you're not grabbing towards certain foods that you might not need. Okay, so those ones that we're going to talk about specifically are ones that are high in fiber and protein. So we're making a soup, which is a really great way, again, getting lots of vegetables, but also kind of making that more of like a meal type of a soup that's more hearty.
And we are making, this is one of my favorite soups.
It is.
This is minestrone. Now, you may be familiar with minestrone. Are you familiar with minestrone?
Yeah.
So, do you have your own like special recipe?
I sort of just get it out.
Yeah, okay, all right. You can get it out. What I love about minestrone is that there are no rules to minestrone. It is a great way to use up some of the ingredients that you might have in the freezer or in your refrigerator. And it's essentially a nice hearty stew. I mean, to get a little history focus here, because I'm a food nerd about this stuff, but it predates the Roman Empire. It was meant to be sort of that hearty soup that you can make on the cheap, because people didn't have a lot, and to fill you up while also giving you some good nutrition. So one of the first ones was literally a porridge made with this grain, which we call fado, which you might know as spelt. And it was a fado porridge, and that would definitely fill you up. And then whatever you had, and whatever you grew, whatever was in season, you would just put into the pot and allow it to sort of cook together. So some of the common things you would find are beans, which would be really important for obviously nutrition and protein and filling you up, and then any vegetables that would be in season. So we thought that with the autumn approaching, not here yet, we're going to use some of those heartier vegetables, those root vegetables, that would make a soup like this really, really comforting. So we're going to start off. So we have our pot here over medium heat, and we're going to add a little bit of olive oil to this, about 2 tablespoons or so. You can add a little bit less if you want, but there's these Italian rules we have to follow for that, so gotta add enough. And then we're gonna add some onion and some garlic. Now, garlic, just a quick little thing on garlic, a little trick to get the paper off, to make things a little bit easier. You can take the side of a knife, or if you really wanna get your anger out and you just wanna smash it, you can use your fist. Or Sarah, you can even just use the bottom of a jar. Might be a little easier. Just give it a nice, give it a good.
There you go.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll do this one too.
Go.
Fantastic, awesome. So just breaking the paper there, and then it'll make it a lot easier to remove off. And so it'll pop right out like that. So no need for any of those gadgets or contraptions that you have to clean after. The less cleanup after, the better, right? So super easy. And the garlic in here is like any of these ingredients, they're completely optional. I love garlic. Especially with the colder weather coming around the corner, I'm loading up on as much garlic as possible. and I just embrace it. I don't care at this point. If I smell like garlic all day, I smell like garlic all day. I'm gonna give it just a little bit more of a crush there. And it's always a good idea with garlic or onions to have them crushed a little bit ahead of time.
Yeah. So the anti-inflammatory properties that are found in your onions and your garlic, when they come into contact with the air, like oxygen, they actually are better absorbed in your body. So I always tell people, leave it for 5 minutes before you kind of cook it. So leave it chopped or cracked.
Yeah, chopped or
That's
crushed.
another great tip.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty much if you touch it, you're gonna feel that sort of stickiness coming out of it,
Yeah.
which you would get if you chopped garlic. That's exactly what you're
That's a
looking
good
for.
sign.
That's a
And
good
for
sign.
those who can't have garlic, what can they do to still get the flavor?
So you're saying can have because the garlic might create
Affect
some
their-
digestive. Yeah. So what you can do if you do like the flavor of garlic but you can't eat it or tolerate it well, if you leave it mostly whole, just let it flavor the oil. You're gonna get most of that garlic flavor in there after, and then you can just remove that clove after. That way you're not eating it, but you still have that flavor in there. So I have the garlic in here with some of our onion, and we just want to heat that up just until it softens. And then again, like any of the root vegetables or any vegetables that you like, you can add at this point.
Yeah.
So we have some celery, turnips, which I don't think we eat enough turnips.
Yeah.
I always see turnips in the grocery store, and no one buys turnips. They're delicious, and they, especially if you've had them raw, they might have a little bit of like an intensity to it. Once they're cooked, they sweeten, mellow out quite a bit, and they're lovely. They're really, really tasty. So we have some turnips, we have some carrots, and we have celery root. Has anyone tried celery root before? It's like the really ugly, hairy-looking vegetable. Again, I don't think people probably try it, but you clean off the outside, and you have this sort of beige color underneath. Super, super tasty. Has that mild taste of celery, but the consistency of almost like a potato when it's cooked. And it can actually be a really nice substitute for like mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
Now, in more of your modern minestrone, you'll find usually a pasta in it, like a small pasta shell or a tube or something like that. Because we're looking to sort of create a dish that's gonna fill you up and sustain you for a little bit longer, I like going for the whole grains. So things like spelt or fado or barley, these are great whole grains that you can add. It takes a little bit longer to cook, but it'll give you a much heartier soup.
And they're higher in nutrients, right? So if you compare it to like a refined grain like white rice or white pastas, they're stripping the fiber from it, some of the vitamin E, the folate. So you do want to make sure that you're incorporating, especially for weight loss, right? Like you want to make sure that when you're eating, you're getting all the nutrients. So it's making every bite count in the same way that we discussed in the previous recipe, but in a different way, right? And the vegetables, because they're kind of lower in calories, I mean, they are a little bit starchy, some of them, but it's really completing that balanced meal. So you're getting your vegetables, you're getting your starch, and you're getting the protein coming from the beans. So, you know, again, when you're thinking about cooking and preparing your meals, you want to make sure that things are easier for you, right? So I personally love one-pot dishes where it's kind of one meal in one pot.
All right, so because this grain will take about 30 minutes to cook, you want to make sure that when you add your vegetables in there, that they're also going to be around the same time. So because these are mostly root vegetables, that's fine. 30 minutes, I'm going to add it all at once. If I had softer vegetables like zucchini or eggplant, add those a little bit later in the cooking process. Otherwise, they're just going to be like way too soft. Yeah, in there. So we've added our grain. We've added our root vegetables.
So what about like a broth or a soup?
Here we go.
There we go.
Yes.
I was just gonna say it's very dry.
So yeah, we're using a vegetable stock. You can use a chicken stock, any broth that you like, or you can use water. If you don't have a stock on hand, if you haven't made anything, if you haven't picked anything thing up, you can just use water.
Right.
You're essentially creating its own broth in there because of all these vegetables and the garlic and the onions. So you're gonna have tons of flavor there. You might just need to adjust the seasoning a little bit, but it's still gonna be very flavorful, right?
Yeah. The other thing is that with certain therapies like chemotherapy or other types of drug therapies, radiation, that can increase your risk for dehydration. Okay, so really important to get enough fluids in. And just so you know, fluid doesn't only mean water. It could be a soup, a smoothie, like anything liquid. And then on the flip side, like if you're experiencing any side effects like vomiting or diarrhea, that also could increase your risk for dehydration. So again, a soup could be a really great kind of way to replenish those nutrients that you've lost. And again, like, Jeremy made his own soup, so the amount of sodium is very slim. You obviously can also get like a pre-made broth or stock from the grocery store. You might want to choose to get like the reduced sodium version. But again, if you have experienced diarrhea or vomiting, you want to actually replenish. So, you don't have to limit that amount of sodium that you're having.
Yeah. I've added some beans in here as well, again, just to thicken it up a little bit. Any beans will work. The Romano beans are very traditional for something like this, but chickpeas, kidney beans, whatever you like. And then a little closer to the end, you can add any leafy greens. So we have some kale here, spinach will work, whatever sort of leafy greens you like, but again, a little closer to the end because they're a little softer.
And then again, to tie in that idea of food safety, right? So really making sure that you're handling food appropriately. One thing would be those cans. So make sure that you wash the top before you open it, because if there's anything that's kind of, it could get into it. And then I guess what other food safety tips would you suggest regarding, storing or?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's common, especially with soups, is storing afterwards. We often let it cool down completely and then we put it in the fridge, but we don't want to forget about it on the counter as well. So there's one thing that we talk about in the kitchen, and it's called the danger zone, or the temperature danger zone. And that's pretty much the temperature between 4 degrees and 60 degrees. So if you think about that, unless you're living in your refrigerator or in your oven, then we're almost always between 40 and 60 degrees, okay? And that is the temperature at which sort of bacteria can multiply and grow. So we have sort of a 2-hour window from when we're cooking something to make sure that we're getting it either above 60 or below 4 degrees, right? So we don't want to leave it out for too long, and that's just one thing that we want to keep an eye on. You can let it cool down, for as much as you want, maybe within that 30 minutes, and then just start packing it in the refrigerator. You don't want to put it in boiling hot, but it doesn't have to be like completely cold or completely cool to put it in the refrigerator. If you want to cool it down faster, then there's a couple things, like you can fill up your sink with some cold water and some ice, and then dip the pot in there, obviously not over the top, but just near the bottom, and that'll cool it down pretty fast as well. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. And then just a reminder with leftovers, any leftovers, that we want to make sure that we're heating them up until it's steaming. So whether it's soup, it should be steaming. Whether it is like chicken or a burger or something solid, it should be steaming if you cut it open as well. I know a lot of us, I eat stuff right out of the refrigerator, but for food safety, it is something that we want to make sure we're
today we aren't cooking anything regarding like animal proteins, but just know that for fish, poultry, any type of meat, you do want to make sure that it's cooked to its appropriate temperature. So using those thermometers. And so you can always look on the the Government of Canada's website under food safety for those temperatures that you want to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's pretty much it. You're going to let this sort of cook down, give it like 30 minutes until the grains are cooked, until your vegetables are cooked. The longer the better. If you let this simmer on a low, minestrone will just the flavors will just intensify. And a little secret you can sort of stick in there. So some people traditionally would stick ham hocks in there, which somebody actually talked about before the class. We're using something a little different, and is the Parmesan cheese. So some people actually put like the rind or whatever's left over of the cheese, you know, clean it up. Obviously, make sure there's nothing growing on it. You don't want that, but a nice little piece, and you just let it simmer in there, and it'll mimic this sort of very savory umami flavor that you get from the pork hock, and you can get it from the Parmesan cheese as well, and it just transforms it. You can pick it out after, or just let somebody find it. It's up to you. They're the lucky ones.
Bite into it.
But here's what we have. I obviously picked the biggest bowl in the kitchen, just so you can see, and it's just super, super hearty. And you know, if you want to finish it with something a little more fresh, you can put some fresh greens on there. And then I always like to add, again, it's a pasteurized hard cheese, a little bit of Parmesan on the end. That's it. That's our autumn minestrone. We got through it.